I'd like to thank everybody for being here this weekend at Conspiracy Con in these strange and mysterious times in which we find ourselves in this country. I want to thank each and every one of you personally for coming to this event, for being with me now, because I believe that the times we're living in is a time for solutions, and I deal in solutions, and what I present to you today, I hope to give you some more tools, not only to know who's doing what to whom, but what we can do about it. The 20th century was the time for problem think. The 21st century is a time for solution think. I would like personally to thank Victoria Jack and Brian Hall for inviting me and believing in this particular thesis, because the presentation that you're going to see tonight that I'll share with you is one of many things that I do, but it's something I've believed in for a very long time. The presentation's title is called The Hidden Persuaders, the Subversive Use of Sacred Symbolism in the Media. And it is only part of what I do, but a very important part. If we turn to the slides, we can start very quickly because there's a lot to go through. This is, of course, a compressed version of a much larger study into symbolism in general. But we don't want to be doing some big, heavy academic analyses here. We just want to keep it very topical and give you an overview of what I consider to be a psychic dictatorship in our midst. I'm concerned about what it's doing to us all, but I'm specifically concerned with what it's doing to the young. And we'll address that as time goes by today. We're going to be talking about advertising and the hidden messages, the aesthetically conditioning motifs and politically conditioning motifs that come across in this very ubiquitous genre, this media. But many writers in the past have dealt with this, albeit they've left out the occult tradition. What you're going to be hearing today is a combination of two particular pieces of information, two studies, which have long been disconnected. In your own country, you've had Marshall McLuhan talk about the powers of suggestion used by the media. You've had Vance Packard and Brian Wilson Key doing some fine work. Gene Kilborn, the activist, all authored people. And more recently, Douglas Rushkoff, doing wonderful work. And I started doing this work when I was 13 in Ireland. Long time interest in the occult, coming from many generations back, but also an interest in art, an interest in symbolism. And I didn't know that in my life there was going to be a convergence of these two realities. It took time. It didn't happen right away. It was only actually when I came across the work of Jordan Maxwell that suddenly I understood what I'd been seeing all the time, that this was more than just skulls and ice cubes. Because why would they be there? We have a connection between aesthetics, the portrayal in art, the portrayal in advertising, and an occult agenda. Very hard to accept for some, but we hope to prove the point tonight. The Western world in general, and America, is what I call symbol illiterate. What you're going to see tonight is a small window into a concept that I've taught for years, taught children especially, and it's just symbol literacy, which is learning about how the universal creator, or the universal presence, the universal intelligence, speaks to us daily. It speaks in symbols, not words. It was so important for the hegemonic authorities and patriarchal bastions to get us off the track of dealing with symbol literacy, that even in the Bible, at the creation of Christianity, before thou shalt not kill, before that edict in the Decalogue, you have this particular commandment, which is thou shalt not make for yourself a graven image or a symbol. It was more important to them than thou shalt not kill. And we're going to find out why. It has to do with the brain and moving us into what's called a left brain type of thought, a left brain type of cognition, a left brain type of expression, away from the right brain holotropic concept, which was more common to our forefathers. But thou shalt make no graven images. What are the ancient world covered in? What is Egypt covered in? Is graven images of God, graven images of divinity. It was absolutely natural to our forefathers to do so, to portray divinity, to portray the mysteries of being in symbolism. It became a very different edict in the Bible where it says, first came the Word. In the beginning was the Word. Well, I take exemption to that. I'm sorry. No, in the beginning does not come the Word of God. In the beginning comes the image of God. Or Goddess, if you want to be actually pedantic about it. But let's leave that aside for now. I work with the tarot and the divination, which is the archive of knowledge, the Gnostic core of the great book of symbolism. The greater book of symbolism, the tarot, these are the main chapters. Anyone who wants to get symbol literate, because Mircea Eliade, Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung have gone blue in the face asking us to get symbol literate, to become aware of how symbols are used, because they take the soul up. By being aware of how symbols work, and art, and imagination, we evolve spiritually. But that which can also help you evolve can also help you devolve, can also help you be enslaved. So the tarot and these great ancient Gnostic canon truths that were laid down by our forefathers were done mostly in symbols, the richness of symbolism, and we teach this. In the occult tradition, it is essential that people become familiar with the role of symbolism and numbers and vibration and so on. One little aside, but connecting very much to what you've heard in other days here, is an interesting fact that what they call the Bible, let's say the Old Testament specifically, the 5 books of the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, are based on the Torah. They'll admit that. You ask anybody who's in the know and they go, oh yes, of course we can accept that the Pentateuch originated with the Hebrew Torah. But what these people will die before they will admit or tell you is that the Torah originates from the tarot. We haven't got time to explore this, but this is irrefutable if you do your homework and go to the reference works. In fact, it's the same word. The word is identical. But the difference is that the Bible and the Torah are communicated in words. Right? Words. The tarot communicates in symbols. And that's where the big problem is. Because you can argue till the cows come home about a particular statement, because now you have a language barrier and you have an interpretation barrier. Well, look, in symbolism, red is red, a sphinx is a sphinx, there's no argument about it. But when it comes to a written terminology, that's when the blood starts flowing. And that was the intention. In ancient medieval art, all the way down from the earliest times, we have symbols coming out of the occult world. We're finding them in the scriptures, finding them in religion. The crucifixion of Jesus, the crucifixion of St. Peter. The entire Bible can be decoded using aesthetic principles alone, or astrotheological motifs, cosmological motifs. The image on the right, for people who do not know, is one of the cards of the tarot, the hanged man. Well, didn't Jesus hang on a tree? Didn't Odin, in the Scandinavian myths, hang under a tree? Didn't Buddha get enlightened under a tree? Didn't Conan the Barbarian get crucified on a tree? I mean, we're seeing this motif all over the place. And science, which has always been doing catch-up anyway to what the mystics have been saying for aeons, but finally they're doing catch-up, and that's wonderful. They've just found that, in fact, symbols are important because, as you see here, it says that there are 240,000 miles of neural threads in the human brain, enough to stretch from Earth to the Moon. On every micrometer of these threads, there exists 250,000 units of information. But this data is recorded only as pictograms, only as composite images, and not as words. That's right. The universal intelligence, our phylogenetic race memory of every experience that our forefathers have had, is encoded in the brain, encoded in our DNA, in symbolism, in symbols, composite images. And today we find ourselves in a world replete with symbolism, images. We become deadened to it because it's so pervasive, in fact. We have the symbols of religion being denigrated by the corporate world. Powerful ancient symbols that we've associated with spiritual uplift are now being used for a different agenda. Jeremy Campbell, in his fine book, says, one important property of language is that while its symbols may be used to bring about physical results in the real world of substance, they need not be used for that purpose. Symbols can be decoupled from physical reality to a greater or lesser extent. Words are not deeds, though they often lead to deeds. Symbols can be manipulated to form new statements and expressions which are only tentative, playful, figurative. Symbols are at liberty to be a little irresponsible and experimental. Now that's a very loaded comment there. In 1835, we have the historian de Tocqueville, in his review of America and in review of the genres that were going on of his time, wrote these words. He said, I fear that the productions of the democratic poets may often be surcharged with immense and incoherent imagery, with exaggerated descriptions and strange creations, and that the fantastic beings of their brain may sometimes make us regret the world of reality. In 1835. You think that's old? Plato was doing the same thing in 300 BC when he warned about the artists, quote unquote, this has been misinterpreted by many scholars, but he just said that the artists, quote unquote, if they're given too much dominion over the mind, there will be a decline of civilization. I believe that he was aware even then of people who are still with us, still operating in our society today. Don't believe it? This is a quote. It says, "I think we are destroying the minds of America, and that has been one of my lifelong ambitions." You can read for yourself who wrote that. They're happy to tell you what they're doing. Well, here's the results of their fine work. Heroin and cocaine use among white youth climbed about 300% over the 2 decades before the 90s. For African American youth, it jumped to a staggering 13 times the rate of 20 years before. The frequency of eating disorders in teenage girls has skyrocketed. You're going to find out why. While any of these problems in isolation raises no eyebrows, taken as a group, they are barometers of a sea change, a new kind of toxicity seeping into and poisoning the very experience of childhood, signifying sweeping deficits in emotional competences. But the other side, they say, oh, kids love advertising. It's a gift. It's something they want. There's something to be said about being in there first, about branding children and owning them in that way. And in boys advertising antisocial behavior in pursuit of a product, that's a good thing. In 1990, compared to the previous 2 decades, the United States saw the highest juvenile arrest rate for violent crimes ever. Teen arrests for forcible rape had doubled, teen murder rates quadrupled, mostly due to an increase in shootings. During the same 2 decades, suicide rate for teenagers tripled, as did the number of children under 14 who are murder victims. Douglas Rushkoff, in his book Media Virus, says children's television and MTV are the easiest places to launch countercultural missiles. The more harmless or inane the forum, the more unsuspecting the audience. I highlighted MTV there for an interesting point. One of the methodologies that these individuals use in their corporate logos is based on the phoneme system. If you say the word as a mantra to yourself, MTV, and say it quickly, MTV, MTV, empty TV, empty TV, empty TV, empty, empty TV. Ever seen any kids that watch MTV? They look pretty empty to me, wouldn't you say? Well, that's what they were being told. The great philosopher and theologian Erasmus said, "The main hope of a nation lies in the proper education of its youth." The others are saying to the children, forget it. Questions are a burden, and answers a prison for oneself. Let us take control. Stop thinking. It's too much of a bother. We'll take care of you. So the experts are saying what is at stake is nothing less than the next generation, particularly males who in growing up are especially vulnerable to such disruptive forces as the devastating effects of divorce, poverty, and unemployment. The status of American children and families is as desperate as ever. We are depriving millions of children of their competence and moral character. Look at just the terminology there. We are depriving millions of children of their competence and moral character. Not they, but we. Esquire magazine said kids won't even find out how much their values have been perverted until they hit the high school. And Douglas Rushkoff says we have come to expect hidden messages in our kids' television. But this story of manipulation goes way back and has occult roots. Anyone who's done their homework knows that one of the groups that operate behind secret societies, it was the Fabian Society from Oxford University. It was founded by Sidney West, who again is very happy to tell you what they're doing. He says to play on those millions of minds, to watch them slowly respond to an unseen stimulus, to guide their aspirations without their knowledge. All this, whether in high capacities or in humble, is a big and endless game of chess with ever extraordinary excitement. Well, we got them. They're called the media, but they've been around longer than television, because the word, in fact, if you study it, goes back to Medes and to a place in the Middle East, not far from where Libya is now, called Media. And in Media were the sorcerers and the astrologers. Not necessarily negative people, but a tribe, a very adept cult from the ancient world who specialized in the use of talismans, amulets, mantras, and sorcery. And the kings of the world knew that if battle hadn't worked, or if legal means hadn't worked to get rid of an enemy, or you didn't want to be known that you were getting rid of your enemy, you simply called on the Medes. And you bring the representative of the media in to your court, and he'll take care of the problem, because he's going to put the spell on your enemy, the hex, because they know how to do it. And that's where we get the word Mediterranean, mediation, meditation, and medication, the medics. Study this alone, and a whole interesting subject will open itself up. Because we still have, you see, the sorcerers and the voodoo and the witch doctrine. We still have it. Only it's now the techno-shamanism. It's the silicon sorcerers. It's the ivory tower witch doctors. And they're still very busy at what they're doing up on Madison Avenue and behind the other great corporate giants who are only too happy to tell you what to think. Not how to think, but what to think. Ursula Franklin, she says, I picture the reality in which we live in terms of military occupation. We are occupied in the way that the French and the Norwegians were occupied by the Nazis during World War II, but this time by an army of marketeers. We have to reclaim our country from those who occupy it on behalf of their global masters. Interesting terms there, interesting phraseology. Well, these individuals, they do go back a long way. And they have understood completely your psyche. They've had generations, centuries to study it. Their type of sorcery involves different kinds of techniques, but it's still the same effect. Telehypnosis, metacontrast, hemisync, synesthesia, embedding. New names, new terms, but for a very old, well-known practice. To get you into groupthink, into subservience. To get you to embody dialectical divisions of which there is no end in our society. To fashion your allegiances for you. To implant associations that your mind might not normally associate. To purvey escapism, rampant escapism, and projection of fantasy into reality. To inflate false personas so that you don't have to be you. You can live it out through the person on the screen. And the excessive eroticization, especially in regards of the female. What we're talking about today has enormous consequences for the women of the planet to find their power again. But just one point, just that little anecdote there, we talked about the endless dialectical divisions. Are you aware of how many there are? And that they're crafted based on a very set agenda to pose one party or one group against the rest. We could explore that alone. We could do a whole seminar on just that one thing alone, of the dialectical divisions that are created in our society. And there are many even in the intellectual academic world, in the function of our own senses and the function of our own biology. And the two that we'll only be able to really touch on today is actually the last ones, liminal or subliminal. We'll be trying to focus more on that. But as I said, this is a very deep subject. We don't have time to go into anything more than an overview. And I would love to get into the whole concept of the lost language of symbolism and do a deeper work on this subject. But that time will have to come. Right now we just have to keep it very topical and accessible. Not only do we have those divisions, but we've got a very, very important tripartite division that these media sorcerers use on us. It is the simple division between the three kinds of intelligence that we have. Most people think only in terms of mental intelligence. No. We should know that there is also body intelligence. Your body is an intelligent, vibrant, living thing. Completely self-contained intelligence there, cellularly. The mind, of course, we're familiar with. Overstated in our culture to an unbelievable degree. But then there's the heart, the intelligence of the heart. And they know how to send signals and coded messages to each of those kinds of intelligence. When you think they're talking to one, actually they're talking to another. And vice versa. So it's kind of hard to track it. It takes symbol literacy to know what they're doing. Who is the enemy? What tools are they using? They're happy to stimulate you in various ways. They're happy to take things away from you down through the centuries for thousands of years and then replace it with things you don't need. They're happy to make those associations for you that we see on billboards every day. Did I give them permission to do that? Did I want to see their artwork facing me or on the sides of buses? I didn't give them permission to talk to me, did I? But they're doing it. Somebody has taken a right off of me. So they're busy telling us what I'll get from them. Things I don't need. Everything. Convenient, smarter, faster, happier. Is that right? But they don't tell you the side effects, do they? They don't tell you about the disassociation, the dysfunctionality, the kids, the teens who are jaded, addicted, bipolar, suicidal, delinquent, sociopathic, institutionalized, possessed. You're literally climbing over people. They used to call it possession in the old days, you know, when the Meads took care of you, or the local witch doctor did his piece on you. They used to call you possessed. Well, we are still possessed today. Actually, if you ask any churchmen, they'll tell you that the rate of possession has gone up since the advent of the television. Oh yeah.